So let me clarify. Uh, I brought this up a couple of times. I brought it up in Delvers. Um, just trying to get people's feedback, but it's been a little frustrating. It's frustrating because I, all of these mediums limit you to maybe two sentences if you're lucky, a lot of times less. And you really can't be clear on what you're speaking about in 50 characters. My full name takes about 20. So it's like there's there's not a lot of room to be clear. So to be clear, what I'm talking about is not, hey, let's add a hit location chart on top of some other bunch of stuff. What I'm looking at is using a chart like this as a determinant for whether you hit your target and and what kind of damage is inflicted upon the target should the hit happen. Now what you see here is 10 positions and no other. They're all on the silhouette. I don't have a drawing put out. I have somebody else drawing for me, and because I'm not very good at drawing. So I can only go on the internet and find similar silhouettes to use as an example. So, and granted, the numbers would be wrong if you were using a 20-sided dice, unless you're a roll low person and no one likes that. But just bear with me. There's 10 positions, say you're rolling a 20-sided dice to hit. So the 10 other possibilities would all indicate a miss of the target completely. If you're hit in the head and you don't have a helmet on, the likelihood that you're going to get back up is slim. Depends on the weapon being used. And in my system, there's none of the, I have a 1d6 in damage. There's no hit points per se. There's wound level, and people can say, well, wound level is just another way of saying hit points. Okay, fair enough, but there's only a handful of them, as opposed to counting back from double digits. When I played my last D&D, my fighter was somewhere in the 20s for hit points, if I recall correctly. And you're constantly counting that down or building it back up with heals, and all your enemies are doing the same, and the battles become you roll your initiative, and that's all a number, and then you roll your attack, and that's all a number, and then you roll your damage, and that's all a number, and it's all just for all the people that say that some of my ideas are bad because they require writing things down. If you're playing these games like D&D, you're writing down things all the time. You're counting HP backwards and then after the battle forwards. And it's a lot of, all right, Bobby the fighter scored 6 points of damage on the orc. The orc counterattacks and scores 4 points of damage on Bobby. You know, the arrow is fired. It's a hit. It does 3 points of damage, and that's all it is. It's just numbers being hurled at targets. A lot of people are, for whatever reason, hate miniatures, which I'll never understand. So you just have this blank, empty space where people are talking about numbers and rolling dice. And it's kind of snoozeworthy, and it's no wonder that when combat comes, it's when people start getting frustrated and bored, because it's really a mathematical exercise. So what I'm talking about doing is, and then there's the roll to hit, then there's the roll to damage, and then blah blah blah. So here you have a 20-sided die. If you don't get a number that's on the body, then it's a miss. If it's a number on the body, then that determines what kind of damage, with a couple of other factors, your strength being involved and all that. But it's more of a, instead of some wild range. And I know some people aren't going to like this because they like to be able to roll for their, and test their luck and all that. But It's a lot quicker if you just say, this is how much potential damage this weapon can do. And it's potential because if the guy's got armor, it's going to be less, or gal, or monster, or whatever it is. So with one roll of the die, you determine whether you hit, where you hit, which is explains how much potential damage is done. And so it slows the game down. Sure, it slows the game down if you have to roll to hit, roll for damage, then roll for location and apply that damage somewhere else. But if you use it as the only thing for combat, it's going to make it faster. Now you roll once instead of 3 times. You're not doing multiple checks. So when I've presented this to people, what they've done is taken their experience, or, well, this is how it worked in this game, so this must be what you're talking about, when indeed that's not what I'm talking about at all. And a lot of that comes from the fact that social media, be it Yahoo chat or Twitter post or whatever, has this limitation on how much you can type. And quite frankly, there's a huge limit on how much people will read. So that lack of communication generates misconception. And people just default to, well, I played, like one guy brought up, Aftermath or whatever, like some 1981 game. And oh God, see, you're just... so it's not the mechanic, it's how the mechanic is used and implemented in amongst the rest of the mechanics that make up the game system. If you narrow-mindedly, sorry for that term, it might make people mad, but if you focus and go, well, this mechanic in this game made that game hard to play, well, then maybe it wasn't used properly, or wasn't the right choice. But that doesn't mean that the mechanic in of itself is always going to lead to that conclusion or that result. I played games where it was a Western, and it was shootouts, and you had a number of positions on the body and a number of positions outside of the silhouette, and you rolled, and it told you whether you hit or you didn't. And if it hit, and it gave the DM a little quick story. Oh, you fired your Winchester rifle and hit the evil Branchard brother in the shoulder, and he spins around. He's not down, but he's wounded and grasping for his weapon, or some sort of dramatic thing like that can be extrapolated from a hit chart. And everybody will say, well, a lot of people say, well, I can make that up. I just can imagine that. Well, yeah, I suppose you can. But here, if you use the thing, again, this is telling you to hit and damage all in one thing. All in one thing. And the player doesn't even need to have it. If you like your DM, if you trust your DM, then the DM is the only one that needs to do it. All you need to do is roll your attack roll and hear what comes of that attack roll. You don't even... Some people get mad. I love how some people complain about being inundated with rules, then being offered not having to learn or monitor the rules, and they want the rules because they want to learn how to game them. If you can't read the rules, you can't learn how to game them. And some people, all they do is metagame. They may say they don't, but that's what they're looking for. They're looking for the loophole in the rules they can exploit. But it does. I understand, and I do not argue with people that say, well, I did that in Aftermath, or I did that in this game and it didn't work well. Probably didn't. But this is not that game, and this is being used in a completely different way. And when used in this way, it will speed up the game as opposed to slow it down. So, and I think Wilford Brimley would play a ranger. I seen him using a fire arrow one time in a movie, so I'd say he's a ranger. I was goofing around with Delver, so that's what the Brimley thing's about.